The morning the NFL Top 100 list dropped, the sports world froze for a second. Every fan, every analyst, every player scrolling through their phones saw the same headline flash across the screen. Saquon Barkley, ranked #1 player in the NFL. And then came the explosion. You could almost hear it ripple through timelines. Talk shows, locker rooms. Wait, Barkley? Over Mahomes? Over Hill? Over Garrett? The disbelief turned into debate, the debate into noise, and within hours, the entire football world was on fire because no one, absolutely no one, saw this coming. For years, Saquon Barkley had been many things: a star, a highlight machine, a cautionary tale, a comeback story. But #1 in the NFL? That was supposed to be someone else's headline. Yet there it was, stamped in bold on the official list, the league's highest individual honor, the recognition that says, you are the standard. And the man wearing that crown? The same one they once said was finished. What makes this story different isn't the ranking itself. It's the journey that made it possible. Because Barkley didn't climb to the top with noise, fame, or flash. He did it the way real legends do, in silence, through pain, through doubt, through nights when the world forgot his name. Rewind 3 years. And this moment feels impossible. In 2021, Barkley was limping off fields again, his knees betraying him, his explosiveness fading. The same New York fans who once called him the future of the franchise were now calling him a failed experiment. Talk shows labeled him injury-prone. Fantasy football owners mocked his inconsistency. And analysts debated if he'd even start another full season. But what none of them saw was what was happening in the shadows. While social media debated his worth, Barkley was rebuilding from scratch, physically, mentally, spiritually. Hours in therapy rooms, endless reps on resistance cords, ice baths at midnight, and film sessions no one asked him to attend. He wasn't chasing the old Saquon. He was creating something new, a smarter, stronger, colder version. That transformation began quietly when he signed with the Philadelphia Eagles. The move shocked fans. Leaving New York felt like betrayal to some, liberation to others. But to Barkley, it was rebirthed. He didn't care about revenge. He cared about redemption. The first few practices in Philly said everything. No cameras, no grand speeches, just focus. Coaches described him as laser-locked. Teammates called him different. He didn't talk trash. He didn't post cryptic tweets. He just ran, smooth, controlled, and ruthless to BY midseason. The numbers were speaking louder than any highlight reel. Yards after contact, highest in the league. Missed tackles forced, top 3 touchdowns in clutch moments. Unmatched. And yet, when reporters asked him about the MVP buzz, Barkley just smiled and said, I'm not chasing that anymore. I'm chasing better. That's what made this year special, the quiet confidence of a man who'd been broken and rebuilt in private. When the NFL cameras rolled and the top 10 countdown hit its final number, the world expected the usual names. Mahomes, McCaffrey, maybe Hill. But then, the screen flickered. #1, Saquon Barkley. The reaction was instant. Talk show hosts stared into the camera like they'd just seen a glitch. Social media exploded with takes. Some cheering, some fuming, all obsessed. Saquon? Over Mahomes. He earned it. No way, this is PR hype. He's back from the dead. Respected. The noise was endless. But Barkley didn't hear any of it that night. As the internet argued, he was at home with his daughter, laughing over dinner. When a reporter texted for a comment, he replied with just 3 words: grateful. Not done. That's the difference between Barkley and everyone else. He doesn't celebrate recognition, he transforms it into fuel. The same humility that carried him through pain now carried him through praise. But make no mistake, this wasn't luck or sympathy voting. It was war-earned. Respect. Coaches across the league began revealing what they'd seen all season, how Barkley's discipline had turned every defensive meeting into a nightmare. One AFC defensive coordinator admitted, you can game plan for speed. You can't game plan for willpower. And Barkley's got more of it than anyone else in the league right now. Even former players, legends like Adrian Peterson and Frank Gore, took to social media to praise him. Saquon's #1 because he never stopped believing when nobody else did. Peterson wrote, real recognizes real, added Gore. Inside the Eagles' locker room, Teammates knew exactly what the ranking meant. Not fame, not clicks, but validation. The kind that doesn't come from fans, but from peers. The kind that says, "You earned this." Yet, with that crown came something heavier. Expectation, pressure, scrutiny, because the same fans who worship you at number one are the first to doubt you at number two. And that's where the twist began. As the season prepared to kick off, analysts started asking the same question. Could Barkley handle being the hunted instead of the hunter? Could a man built on quiet persistence survive the noise of the spotlight? The irony was cruel. For years, they said he was too quiet, too humble, too reserved to lead. Now that he'd finally taken the throne, they said he might not be loud enough to keep it. But Barkley wasn't interested in debates or predictions. He was interested in proof. He walked into training camp wearing a hoodie that said, "No noise, just work." And when a reporter asked if he felt pressure being ranked above the league's biggest stars, he simply said, "Pressure is what I've already survived." That line spread like wildfire across social media. The quote of a man who had lived through injury, criticism, doubt, and still found his way to the mountaintop. By the time the preseason ended, one thing was clear. Saquon Barkley wasn't just the top player in the NFL. He was the embodiment of a message every underdog understands, that sometimes the loudest comeback is the one you make without saying a word. The list had crowned him. The fans had debated him. The media had dissected him. But Barkley? He was already looking ahead, because for him, the number beside his name wasn't the finish line. It was just the starting gun. And as he walked off the practice field that evening, helmet tucked under one arm, sweat dripping, sun setting over the Philadelphia sky, you could see it in his eyes. This wasn't the story of a man who reached the top. It was the story of one who had just begun ruling it. The silent king had risen, and the kingdom had no idea what was coming next. The sun had barely risen over Philadelphia when the noise began again. Sports radio, podcasts, morning talk shows. Every microphone in America was pointed at one man's name, Saquon Barkley, the number one player in the NFL. It wasn't a headline anymore. It was a battleground. Fans argued like it was religion. Mahomes still runs this league. McCaffrey's more complete. No way a running back deserves the top spot in 2025. But beneath all that noise, behind all the shouting, there was only one voice that mattered, Saquon's. And he wasn't saying a word. Inside the Eagles training complex, he moved the same way he always did. Early in, laid out, earbuds in, hoodie up. No cameras, no statements, no gloating. Because Barkley understood something most players don't until it's too late. The higher you climb, the quieter you need to become. Still, even he couldn't escape the storm. Everywhere he went, there were reminders of his new status. Billboards downtown flashing his face beside the words, "The King of the NFL." Reporters outside his gym waiting for a quote. And even his teammates, proud as they were, couldn't help but joke. "Hey, don't tackle the number one guy too hard in practice. Coach will fine you." He'd laugh, shrug, and keep working. But deep down, he knew what came next. Being number one isn't about a list. It's about surviving the target that comes with it. Every defender in the league had circled his name now. Every linebacker was waiting to make a statement tackle. Every safety wanted to prove the rankings wrong. And that's when Barkley did something very few saw coming. He didn't push back. He didn't fight the pressure. He embraced it. In an interview before the season opener, he said calmly, "If the league wants to come for me, I'm good with that. I've been chasing ghosts my whole life. Let them chase me now." Those words became a rallying cry across Philadelphia. Barkley wasn't running from the crown. He was wearing it like armor. Opening week arrived like a storm. The stadium was packed, the air electric, the tension thick enough to taste. The cameras zoomed in on his face as he knelt on the sideline, eyes closed, head bowed. You could almost feel the calm before the chaos. Across the field, the defense stared him down. You could see it in their body language. They wanted him, the number one player in the NFL. The one everyone was talking about. They were going to test him. First snap of the game. He lined up in shotgun beside Jalen Hurts. The defense stacked the box. 8 men, no disguise. They were daring him to run. The ball snapped. Barkley took it, waited half a second, then exploded through a microscopic gap. Low, fast, ruthless. A linebacker dove. Missed. Another tried to wrap him up. Failed. He spun, accelerated, and before anyone knew it, he was gone. 73 yards. Touchdown. The stadium erupted into chaos. The crowd was shaking the earth. The sideline went wild, and even Hurts laughed as Barkley jogged back. Calm as ever, no celebration. No taunt. Just a quiet nod to the sky. That was the difference. Where others screamed for attention, Barkley let his play do the talking. And that play? It was louder than any press conference could ever be. But the season wasn't all fireworks. 2 weeks later, the Eagles stumbled. Barkley was bottled up by one of the league's top defenses. The same analysts who praised him now started whispering. Was the ranking a fluke? It's the cycle every great player knows. One bad game, and the crown suddenly feels heavier. That night, as his teammates left the locker room, Barkley stayed behind, sitting alone on the bench, helmet by his feet. No frustration, no anger, just reflection. One of the trainers passed by and said softly, "Rough one, huh?" Barkley smiled. "That's football. You don't wear the crown because it's easy. You wear it because you can handle the weight." That line, caught later in a behind-the-scenes documentary, summed up his entire identity. Because Saquon Barkley didn't need validation anymore. He'd already been doubted, injured, traded, and underestimated. Now, he was driven by something much deeper, ownership. He owned his story, his pain, his process, his throne. And as the season went on, that mindset began transforming the team around him. You could see it in the huddle, players leaning on him not just for big runs, but for calm. You could see it in the locker room, young players asking for advice, veterans echoing his habits. Even the coaching staff noticed. When Saquon speaks, one assistant said, "Everyone listens. Because he's not loud, he's real." By midseason, he was leading the league in scrimmage yards again. But the stats weren't what mattered. It was the energy, the aura, the sense that when he touched the ball, anything could happen, even the impossible. Then came the defining moment, the primetime showdown against the 49ers. A matchup hyped as the battle for the crown. McCaffrey versus Barkley, speed versus power, silence versus spotlight. The cameras zoomed in on Barkley. Pre-game, headphones in, eyes locked. Unshakable. This wasn't just another night. It was a statement. The game was brutal. The hits were violent. The pace relentless. By the fourth quarter, both backs were exhausted. Both teams tied. Then came the final drive, 2nd and 8. Ball on the 41. Clock running. Barkley took the handoff, slipped one tackle, lowered his shoulder through another. Then, like a flash, cut right, turned upfield, and vanished into daylight. 60 yards later, he crossed the goal line. Game over. The crowd lost its mind. Teammates mobbed him. The announcers shouted, "He's not just number one on paper. He's number one in reality." And still, Barkley didn't celebrate. He just stood there, breathing, looking up at the scoreboard like a man watching his destiny catch up to him. When reporters asked how it felt to prove the critics wrong, he shook his head. "I didn't come here to prove anyone wrong," he said quietly. "I came here to prove myself right." Those 9 words became gospel across the league. The critics stopped talking. The doubters faded. And even the loudest haters admitted what fans had known for months, that Barkley's reign wasn't about hype. It was about heart. As the regular season ended, his name wasn't just at the top of the rankings anymore. It was etched into something bigger. Respect. The same fans who once doubted him were now wearing his jersey. The same analysts who questioned him were calling him a role model. And the same league that almost forgot him had made him its face. But if you asked Saquon Barkley what the crown meant, he'd still give the same answer. "It means I've got more work to do." Because legends don't celebrate arrival. They prepare for the next climb. And as he walked off the field that night, confetti falling, cameras flashing, fans chanting his name, you could see it in his smile. It wasn't pride. It wasn't relief. It was peace. The kind of peace that only comes when a man who was once broken realizes he was never weak, just waiting for his moment. Saquon Barkley didn't just take the number one spot. He earned it, yard by yard, hit by hit, year by year. And as the lights dimmed and the locker room emptied, he tied his shoes, took one last look at the field, and whispered under his breath, "Let them come for the crown. I'm not done ruling yet." Because the silent king hadn't just risen, he'd learned how to carry the throne.